Hi, AP World crew. So today I'm going to try something a little bit new for me. I'm going to try to screencast the presentation of notes here to try to help kind of catch you up to where you should be in the book right now. So I don't know. Let's give it a shot together. The whole point of this first PowerPoint here is to try to understand or explain why England led the Industrial Revolution and some of the dope technology that they had to help them do this. I don't know. Let's try it out. Let's see if this thing even works. Okay, so right away I'm noticing that my little clicker tool isn't there, so I'm kind of freaking out about this. But if we look at this picture, I threw this on there because I think it gives a nice bit of continuity versus change. So continuity, if we look around in the back here, right, we've got all of this green. Guys, I'm so bad at this. I'm so sorry. If we look over in the corner here, though, right, you can see the green, luscious fields that England was famous for, right? Beautiful farming, pastoral land. And obviously, the rest of it is now being dominated by urbanization and industrialization. So that's the change over time. Now, the other thing I want to stress is I'm going to go extremely fast because videos take a ton of memory. And so I'm going to try to save space on the computer. However, feel free to pause the video, write down what you need to as we move along. So the points that I want to try to make here is England led the Industrial Revolution for a ton of reasons. If we go all the way back, farming is always the answer to why there are cities, right? So if we look at farming, we can go back to the Columbian Exchange and things like potatoes and corn coming from the New World back to places like England and Ireland, and those things created a lot more calories and made farming more productive. And the better farmers got at farming, the more food they made. And the more food they had, the more people you could have in a society. So populations boom. But you also don't need as many farmers anymore. And so all these people now move to the city because they're basically out of jobs. The enclosure movement then happens where they fence up all the old common farmlands, and any of the last little poor farmers, they're gone, punted. The only place left is to migrate to the New World or move to the cities. And so in the span of 50 years, literally all that rural population is now moving to the cities. Okay, and so that means that now we can have centralized areas of urbanization and factories. And so here's just some images that kind of go over what the enclosure movement looked like. Here's a seed drill that shows how efficient they were getting at farming. All right, step 2, resources. England was just blessed with everything. Not only were there an island surrounded by water and all this other cool stuff, but coal. Because if you don't want to burn down every last tree in pursuit of energy, it's better to burn old dead dinosaurs that look like kind of mud deep in the ground. So that works. They had extra people. Use them. They had iron. Use them. They had sheep for wool. Use them. They just had all this stuff to use. Other boring things, they had innovations. They had banking. They've had property law, lots of education. All that's cool. Really, the last key points kind of blend together. They had a middle class. They had lots of, very wealthy people that had been already working with linens and trying to make money, and now they just saw the opportunity to go crazy. This is classical liberalism. So a government that will stay out of industry. So I'm a rich guy. I build a factory. I pay you pennies because I know there's a million of you and you'll work for cheap. And then I make a fortune. Liberalism, right? That's a free market. And then lastly, the empire, the benefit of stealing everyone else's land is you get to use everything on their land. And so all the cotton, from the New World that comes back is cheap. It's right away threaded, turned to cloth, and bam, it's game on. All right, so there's some images that kind of show how blessed they were, and the power loom, one of those early inventions made up in Scotland to help make cloth quickly. There's the size of the British Empire. And then the last couple things that I wanted to show you, so I didn't mean to give you a stroke if you're epileptic. Right? Why else were they so darn successful? Well, they had all these other technologies and innovations that allowed them to really make it happen. And so if we look at some of those other things, right, this top point here is the steam engine, and that really is a gateway for so much of the Industrial Revolution. Originally, it starts as actually a way to be able to pump water out of coal mines so that they get more coal and then, use the coal to power more things. And so the steam engine kind of was a self supporting circuit. But we know it famously for its role in factories and ultimately trains and steamships. Okay, improvements, upgrading ore, iron ore into steel was fantastic. But the railroad is an absolute game changer. And when we get to the Industrial Revolution, you got to think about in the context of the time period. Most transportation was done with like horses or a wagon. You can't pull heavy equipment with a 2-horse wagon. But trains, the iron horse, well, they can pull tons. All right. And unlike ships don't sail through land. You can dig a canal, but canals are really cumbersome. Trains, you just build like a turn in the rail. And then the train goes around a mountain and into a city. So it's like a lot better. And so we notice that anywhere where rail expands, then we also start to notice other cities pop up. And where cities pop up, factories pop up. And then, boom, industrialization grows, kind of like the creeping, moss across the ground. It's the veins of industry. All right. So the key industry that we're really looking at here, though, is the textile industry. Standard of living had increased to the point where there was like a really high demand for cotton products, for linens, and that went back into the early 1700s. Early on, they had something called the putting out system, which is not something that happens on Friday night after the football game. Sorry, bad joke. But the putting out system was like this idea where, like, purveyors of cotton would go to small farming communities and ask farmers if they wanted to do some spinning during the winter months when there was no farming to do. And so they got little amounts of textiles over the winter months. Eventually, that turns into proto industry where more and more people meet in one location, but none of it could keep up with demand. But because cities were growing, these smart middle class guys go, I really know how to make money. I'll buy super expensive machines and then I'll pay thousands of people to work on those machines. It will all be in one little spot. And I will beat you if you don't show up on time. I will pay you next to nothing because I want to make a lot of profit. I'm going to have you learn one job. So all you're going to do is on some press all day, but that's it. And so begins the dehumanization of man. It's really like turning man into a robot. And so there you go. That's kind of what the beautiful English countryside was turned into. Here's Staffordshire and all the factories. And then down here, people doing their horrible divided specialized labor, little cogs in the industrial machine. And then lastly, what I'm trying to get at is all of this increased supply. I mean, it gave people the cheap crap that they wanted. It could be sold in the new world. It could be bought by people with their new, expendable consumer income. But there was a cost on the environment, right? We noticed that coal burning is horrid for the air and the water. Eventually to the point where like the River Thames is basically just a toxic death pool of mercury. So that's horrible. It did save the forests because they didn't have to cut down every tree anymore, but it really does begin this sad, grimy history, which is why the Romantic movement later will paint all these beautiful things and make poems about trees and flowers and the color green, because sadly it's all going away. All right, well, hopefully that was helpful. If not, well, delete this. I don't know, whatever. But I'm trying my best. Guys, hang in there, and hopefully this made a lot of sense.